All right, so you've gotten the overview, the layout, all of how After Effects kind of works with the efficiency and trying to get you to your tools. So let's go ahead and dive into actually adding some keyframes and adding some animations in this timeline down here. And so what I've done is I've gone into this first comp in the compositions, and from here in this section you're going to have a project file to follow along with. So everything that I do, you'll be able to either create your own, or you can import the composition, and I'll have that in the resources folder. So first thing we want to do is I'm going to add a simple shape. And so what we want to do is come up here to the rectangle tool, click and hold, and we're going to use an ellipse. And so what we want to do is click and drag and hold shift to constrain the proportions. And now I'm going to let go, and then I'm going to hit V to go back to my selection tool so that I can move that around. So now we've just got a simple white ball. And now what I'm going to do is go to my layer, I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to type in ball so we know that that's what that layer is. So what I want this ball to do is I want it to move from this point of the screen to the next point of the screen. So how do I do that? Well, that's where keyframes come in. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this anchor point and I'm going to move it to the center of the ball, because that's going to show if I were to make the ball bigger, it's going to get bigger from the center. If I try to do that now, it's actually going to do it from the side. So we want to make sure that that is right in the center. So how do we do that? Well, before we add keyframes, I want to show you the properties of this layer. So if I drop this arrow down, we can see that we've got these transform options: anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Now all of these follow a keyboard shortcut of the first letter except for opacity. So if I were to hit A, for example, for anchor point, it brings up just that property. If I were to go back to these and I hit P for position, it's going to bring up that property. So let's go back. If I use S, that's for scale. And if I use R, that's for rotation. Now transparency, opacity is T, and that actually will bring up that option. So you just need to remember that T is for the shortcut, not O. And that's probably because all of the shortcuts are on from your left hand, and O is way over there, so T makes it just a little bit easier. So what we want to do is go to our anchor point. So we're going to use A, and we're going to watch these numbers in order to change this and make sure that everything's working. So in order to move this anchor point, I'm going to use Y to use what's called the pan behind tool, which we've talked about in previous videos. So now I want to try and put this in the center, but it doesn't do anything. So how can I get it to go in the center? Hold the control button and it will snap with these grids to different sections. So I want to go directly to the center and then let go, and now that puts that anchor point right in the center. So if I scale it down, it's now going to come from the center. So pretty cool, but we're going to get even cooler here in just a second. So now what I want to do is actually move it. So I want to open up the position property, and I'm going to set a keyframe right here at the beginning by clicking this stopwatch. Now once I click this stopwatch, it adds a keyframe to my timeline. And notice how this is blue. That means that we're on a keyframe and we can adjust the position of this ball by using the Y coordinates, which are up and down, and the X coordinates, right and left. Now what I want to do is move this ball over to the other side. So I'm going to hit V to make sure I'm on my move tool, and I'm going to move forward in time. We're going to go 2 seconds. And now I'm going to move the ball to the other side. Now before you do that, I want to let you know that there's a couple ways we can do that. First is we can change the position here and move it over to the side, and notice there's a line that After Effects creates to show us the trajectory of the ball. Now this will move it over that way, and I'm going to use Control-Z to undo that. Another thing I can do is click on the ball and then drag that across the screen. Now notice it kind of is freeform right now. If you hold shift, it'll lock it into a straight position, and then I can do it that way, and it'll automatically add a keyframe. So after you've added your first keyframe, other keyframes will be automatic as you add them. So let's go ahead and undo. So I'm going to just go to 2 seconds, and I'm going to move this over. If I want to move it farther, I can hold shift to go faster. So as I'm holding shift, it's locking it in, and it's also going to use my units and go a lot further. So let's do about right there. Now if I scroll back in real time, you can see the ball moving across that line. So if I play this back with the space bar, the ball moves across the screen. Now that's pretty simple. So what else can we do with this shape? Well, this was the position. We can also use S to pull up the scale, and so let's do a keyframe right at the beginning, and then what I'm going to do is use the U key to open up any other keyframeable properties that I've changed. So we've got this position. So now what I want to do is I want this to scale as I'm going across the screen, and we want it to match up with this keyframe. So I can do that by clicking on position and using K as a shortcut to go to the next one. Otherwise I have to scroll through to here. So using K or J to go back in between keyframes can help you speed up your workflow. And I teach from a keyboard shortcut approach first. That way that's how you learn, and you'll be really efficient and fast in After Effects. So let's go ahead and go to the next keyframe here, and we're going to change this scale to, let's say, 100 and wherever we land, 192. So now as I go back, I can see that when I play it back, the ball gets bigger and it moves across with this position. So with these other ones, we have rotation and opacity. If we were to use a rotation, you wouldn't really be able to see it because we don't have any kind of design on here. And the opacity, what you can do with that is, I'm using J to go back on the keyframes. I'm going to set a keyframe here. I'm going to change the opacity to 0 and then use K to go to my other keyframes, and we're going to change this to 100%. So now if I move back, we're going to see there's going to be no ball because the opacity is at 0. And as I play this, it's going to come into view and move over, scale, and use the position. So that's all for this tutorial. This is adding keyframes. In the next video, I'm going to go over ways that you can adjust the keyframes in relation to the other ones, and show you a little bit more things in the timeline.